face-to-face. We've been doing these presentations. I think we were more hybrid last year. As you know, the previous year I think we were all virtual. So it's good to be back. For any junior parents that other junior parents that you happen to speak to, just let them know this is going to be recorded by BCAT. And as I said in the email we sent out, BCAT actually has a counseling page on the website that records all our events. So feel free to watch that. Could be good Friday night watching for you. So the way the format's going to work tonight, each council is going to talk about something that is about the college application and selection process. So we obviously know this is a very important time of year, and we've tried to, over the years, make this presentation really about what we have seen as the more important parts of the process. I don't know what's going on with the lighting. One other thing to keep in mind is we are providing a wealth of information tonight, hopefully in less than 90 minutes. We're shooting for 60. But please keep in mind, this information is being shared with juniors over the course of this semester. So counselors have already started meeting with juniors. They try to meet with juniors between small group and one-to-one meetings 3 to 5 times by the end of the school year. So keep that in mind. We'll give you the whole kit and caboodle tonight, but again, we're kind of spacing this out. We recognize that. So it's just counseling staff. All the counselors are here tonight. Like I said, everyone's going to speak. We have 2 secretaries in our office, and their information is posted up here in your slideshow handout and on our website. So I just usually do this in every one of our presentations. Just so you know, we do a senior planning night in the fall every year. So certainly we may see you again in the fall. We also do a freshman and sophomore academic planning night in March, and then we do this junior planning night. So we do have a strategy in the counseling office. We do try to meet certain objectives at each grade level, and that's what this slide is about. We call it a developmental model. We recognize that students, depending on the grade level, that they're at different places throughout high school. And so we're trying to meet them where they're at, depending on the grade level. And we all know junior year is really about preparation and planning for post-high school. And so that's very important to us and our staff, and we devote a lot of time to that. All right, so we're going to jump in. We're going to start with Ms. Diozzi.
Hi. I'm going to talk about the preliminaries to start. Generally, we ask students to begin to define who they are, what they're looking for. I will, in the interest of full disclosure, I will say that for this junior class, because of COVID, the typical career assessments that we would have done with them on a regular basis went a little bit sideways. So we have expected them to be a little bit more self-directed. If kids still have no idea of what they want to study, I just want to reassure them, or anyone who's here, that undecided is still absolutely acceptable as a college major. And also we have a lot of career assessments, and we can give them a lot of advice to help figure that out. So if your kids are still struggling or juniors are still struggling, just see your counselor and we'll help you figure things out. By this point, I think students do know what their strengths and weaknesses are as learners, whether or not they care to admit that to themselves. And then we assume that since you're all here, you are college bound. And we want students, if they don't specifically have a major, to at least be leaning in a particular direction, like I want to study history or I want to study STEM, and sort of know in what direction they want to travel. We do expect students to use SCORE and check their email weekly. A lot of the things that we share with them are timely pieces of information, and some of the things have deadlines, especially as we head into senior year, so we want to build those habits early. All of the counselors have a Google Classroom where we share materials electronically, and because we have the students for more than 1 year, the things that we share live in that Google Classroom. So anything, for example, that I'm sharing with juniors will still be there next fall. We do update it, but we never delete the classroom. We want students to meet with us individually, even though we're also meeting with them in small groups. The small group meetings are really to disseminate large amounts of general information and to have a more personal conversation about, say, their GPA or their test scores. They would meet with us privately, and we do expect them to set up those meetings on their own. We want students to spend some dedicated time outside of school to look at their options. I know that's not always possible, although with February vacation next week, and April vacation, and a couple of professional development days, we would hope that they would spend some dedicated time talking to you, looking at resources, and touring colleges. And that's all in the service of developing a list of colleges and universities that they might want to apply to. We use SCORE, which is a replacement from Naviance. If you have younger kids, older kids, they would have used Naviance. And we use SCORE to transmit Burlington High materials as part of the application process. So the student is responsible for sending the application and the payment, but we send supporting documents like a transcript and letters of recommendation directly from Burlington High. We'll talk about those in more detail later on. They can also use SCORE to research and compare colleges, and one of the great things about having one platform for all this information is that information that you're looking for from multiple colleges, for example, do they need SAT scores, is going to be found in the exact same space on every college SCORE profile. So for that preliminary searching, you can always count on finding the information rather than having to dig through a website. We also have what's called scattergrams, which we'll talk about. It's data based on previous Burlington High applicants and whether or not they were admitted to a college. I'll talk about those later. And then SCORE also offers or has offered a variety of career assessments as well. This is the time, in the first junior meeting, this was one of the things we started asking students, to start considering, how far away do you want to go? What's the reality of that? For example, a student might want to go to California, but mom and dad might have a different opinion on that. What do they want to study? What state might they want to be in? Do you want to consider, for example, a state school in Massachusetts? How big is the college? Of course, cost, tuition, that's a huge factor. Do you want a dorm there? Are you looking for specific programs like a music program or an art program? So this is where students start to refine their list and see what colleges have to offer them. The first college search resource we start with is SCORE, because when a student likes that college, we want them to follow it on SCORE. That way parents who request to see the student's profile on SCORE and counselors can easily see what the kids are looking at. We do recognize that students really use social media, TikTok, YouTube, to get advice. My one piece of advice, or our piece of advice, is to make sure that the person who's giving you advice on social media has some credentials. You know, especially if they worked in admissions, that would be great. But if it's just some random person doing a TikTok, we want you to take that more with a grain of salt. It's also possible to simply just Google things, you know, best biomedical majors on the East Coast, and that can give you a list. There are virtual and in-person college fairs. In fact, the Reading, is Mr. Aguilar still here? When is the Reading? March 16th, they're restarting the Reading Cooperative College Fair. Is it at Reading High?
It is.
And so it'll be an in-person college fair. We haven't had one of those since 2018, I think. I don't even think they had it in 2019, just due to staffing. And then there are also sites like the College Board and ACT Student, which are the testing sites, but also offer college search options. We strongly encourage students to visit a campus. Next week, if there are openings, weather's going to be nice, so you could probably visit some colleges over February vacation. One of the, I guess, blessings of COVID was that a lot of colleges upped their game online. So now their virtual tours and their online access is really excellent. So if a school is particularly far away, you can get a lot more information online than you would have. Students also can attend a tour, and what we also recommend that they stay for an information session where the college will give them information about SATs and how to get in, and the students can ask questions. Sometimes they offer open houses. Those tend to be for specific majors like engineering. Sometimes they offer overnight visits, and a lot of colleges also offer a self-directed tour. Ideally though, we want you to register through the admissions office so they know that you're interested and they have your name and information and you're already in their system. So, I already mentioned this a little bit when we talked about the scattergrams and whether or not you'll get into a college or not. So at this point, all the juniors have a GPA, but it's only computed through sophomore year. So that GPA will change for a lot of students significantly in June, and they'll get a new GPA at the end of the year. So a REACH college is the college for which you are below the requirements on your GPA. That said, if a student has a perfect GPA or is at the top of the class, they're still not guaranteed admission to Princeton. So some colleges, because they're highly selective, remain REACH schools for all kids. And again, it's based on where you stack up and where your strengths are. A realistic school is where you meet the standard for admission, maybe you're 1 or 2/10 of a point off with your GPA, but overall it looks good. And a safety is where your GPA and test scores might be much higher than what they're looking for. One thing that's really important to understand is a safety school does not mean it's a throwaway school. Your safety school should be a school that you want to go to. And often, sometimes the safety schools are the ones that give you the most money and do the most to lure you and throw perks at you. Lastly, a financial safety school is a school that you can afford that would be just sort of, you don't necessarily have to worry about what the aid package would be when it comes in. And along those lines, I don't think anyone else is saying this, but the University of Maine system and the State University of New York system now price match the University of Massachusetts system. So those schools, if you want to go out of state, now are much more financially safe or perhaps comfortable if you want to look at those systems. This is a scattergram for New York University, so all of the dots and triangles that you see are students from Burlington High. So any student in SCORE can look at the scattergram for each college as long as we have had more than 5 applicants, because we don't want to out anyone by their acceptance rate. And then across the x-axis, which is the bottom, that's the GPA. So it goes up toward the 5, and then the y-axes are the SAT scores and the ACT scores. It's a little hard to figure out right now because so many colleges have been test optional, but basically a student can ballpark where they stack up by really starting with their GPA. The scattergram is meant to be a reality check, but it can also show you where you might need to improve. And as you can see, NYU is pretty competitive. The kids in red, generally on all of these things, red means stop and green means go. So you can see we've only had a couple of admits. The kids in blue were waitlisted. Unfortunately, the odds of getting off a waitlist are not great all the time, so often waitlist doesn't mean that they were admitted, and then all the kids in red did not get in. This is the scattergram for Framingham State, so you can see that they are far more generous with admissions to our students. You might see that there's an outlier on the right who had a very high GPA, and they might have been denied probably because they applied to a specific program. And then they said, I don't have a second choice. So we encourage students to look at all the scattergrams and really try to get sort of a mathematical, data-driven sense of whether or not a college is appropriate for them to apply to. We never discourage students from applying to REACH schools, we just don't want you to apply to all REACH schools. So I just mentioned Framingham State, and that's one of the state universities. The minimum requirements for admission to the state schools and for most colleges almost exactly line up with what we require for graduation. 4 years of English, 4 years of math through Algebra 2, 2 years of social studies, we have 3. Some of the state universities will take the best 2 out of 3. 3 years of lab science, and every single science class that we offer is a lab science, and 2 sequential years of the same world language. So they do have to be in a row, The students can't skip a year. And I will say that for schools like UMass Amherst is no longer considered, these requirements do not necessarily meet the requirements of UMass Amherst. And then Mass College of Art is another public university, and the student would absolutely have to submit a portfolio. So for those two schools, the requirements would exceed what you see on the slide. And now Ms. Wojtasek. Oh, does anyone have any questions? Our sense is if you have questions about what we're talking about, we're happy to answer them. And then if you have a question about something we haven't addressed, we'll just tell you to wait till we get there. But does anyone have any questions so far?
Yeah, do the parents have access to the score system?
Yes, you do. I don't think you, yes, you do. Yeah, you can see what's there. What you can't do, the kids only mark, for example, next year when they're applying, things like that, but yes, you should be able to see what's there. And your kids can invite you. And if you want to sign up anyway, you can let us know.
So would that be in their Google Classroom or Aspen?
Actually, it's in Google Classroom, so it would be either posted in Google Classroom or in our junior college planning guide, the SCORE website. We do ask kids to bookmark some of these sites because they're going to be, there are going to be a lot of websites that they're going to have to use, probably up to 5. Any other questions before we start talking about competitive colleges? Yep.
How many colleges, like ballpark number, we should apply to reach realistic? I think total number. Do you have like any recommended, like 8 to 10?
I would say right now the average at Burlington High is probably around 8 to 10, but that doesn't mean that that would necessarily apply to your child. We've had kids apply to say 21 colleges, and then I have some who did one and done. They applied early decision and got in, or they knew. I had one student who wanted to be a nurse. She wanted to go to Fitchburg State because her mom, who was a nurse, had also gone to Fitchburg State. She's like, that's where I'm going. And she got in, and that was it. So for some students, they have a favorite school. So it really varies. What we really encourage is the mix of a couple of reach schools, a good number of realistic schools, and 1 or 2 safeties or more. That's really what we're looking at. And of course, every college has a fee to apply. So if you were applying to 20 or 21 schools, those fees are upwards of about $80 for some schools, or even $100. So that can add up quickly. So what we really want is the student to build a list that makes sense for them. Anyone else? Okay, Mrs. Wojtasek will talk.
Hello, everybody. So to make a little laughter in the room, I got into Harvard. They left a first floor window unlocked, and I'm just walking around in here. So this process is stressful, and we are all in this together. I'm going to talk a little bit about the more competitive colleges and universities are looking for students that have AP courses, have dual enrollment courses, and I'm going to talk, we'll discuss that in the next slide, have math through pre-calculus and calculus, have 4 years in all 5 core subjects. So what does that mean? English, math, science, social studies, and your world language. Rigorous senior year schedule, no senioritis. We want to make sure that senior year is a really solid year for your students in taking courses that are going to challenge them and prepare them to be successful at the next level. Specific requirements for competitive programs, engineering and music. I wish we could tell you this is an exact science. It is not. It is very individualized. So if your student does know that they're in one path, they're definitely going into engineering, we want to make sure we research that specific major, what are the courses to prepare them to put themselves in the best light for that admissions process. Go to the next one. So the course selection process, I don't know if your students have been talking to you about this. We're going to be coming up, it's going to start after vacation, where all counselors are going to have grade level group meetings. So that means that we're going to meet with freshmen through seniors, so soon to be seniors, and we're going to be talking about new courses that be coming up and what's the best preparation for the next year. Teachers are going to be sharing their recommendations for your students on Aspen. So you will be able to see what your student has been recommended for the next level. And then hopefully you've heard about advisory, and it is a bi-weekly time when your students are meeting with 2 faculty members. We're discussing different topics, and we're going to be doing a course selection presentation as well. And then we're going to be, so this is as you can tell, a whole month spring process preparing for the future. And we're going to be reviewing Aspen. There's going to be an Aspen assembly, how your students that have lots of spaces that fulfill their requirements, how to input their classes. And then of course we're going to finalize this whole month-long process with individual one-to-one meetings. So we will be able to meet with your students and talk about, this is your possible major, this is your track, and are you in the best shape taking the courses that you need for senior year. Before we move on, do you have any questions on that, on the course selection process as we go? So again, we want to make sure the students are choosing challenging classes in which they could succeed. So when we can talk about that individually, if a student really wants to challenge themselves and go into an AP course, do you have everything you need to be successful in that course? And going back to SCORE, great source of information, but we also want to check those individuals' colleges and admission websites and what they're looking for. Next one. Okay, additional opportunities. So we talked a little bit about that rigorous course load. So we have students that, for example, might be taking a couple AP classes and they can't fit certain courses in. We do have 2 options for virtual coursework, and that's really primarily for juniors and seniors that have some scheduling issues and can't fit everything that they need to fit. And that would be BHS, which is a virtual high school option, and Edgenuity. So these 2 platforms are online courses. So the teacher could be anywhere. But the student is logging in, doing the coursework, and getting credit, high school credit for it. And again, it would be outside of Burlington, but it would be scheduled into their regular rotation during the week. Students may only take courses BHS does not offer. So if there's some schedule conflict, obviously that's something we will work on individually. So going back to dual enrollment options, so those are courses that the student is getting high school credit for as well as college credit for. And we have partnerships with Middlesex Community College, UMass Boston, in the courses that are highlighted here, honors AP and honors physics, calculus, Latin, programming, and so on. So when the students are filling out their common applications, they'll actually see a piece that will talk about their schedule, and it'll say, have you taken any dual enrollment classes? And they can highlight that information, and if they end up going to a school that takes that credit, for example, I had a student that is at Bridgewater, and he got AP credit as well as dual enrollment credit, so he's really in a sophomore track because he received so much credit from the courses that he took in BHS. Any questions on that? So the state university admissions, as you know, things are changing, and I know Ms. Yossi mentioned, especially for our flagship university, the requirements are a little more stringent than they used to be in the past. So we really want to encourage students to check the individual websites and the individual majors, but we also want to encourage all of our students to take SATs. So as you know, we are a test site. We will offer them in March, May, and June, and then there's an August test date as well. And hopefully you received all the information that we mailed home. But if students have a GPA below a 3.0, there is a sliding scale for the state schools, and that will be in the next slide. But that's an individual conversation we can have because things have changed a little bit. Many schools are test optional. We do want to have the SATs, and if they are right on target or above the college average, it would be a good idea to send them, but that's a conversation that we can have individually. So I don't know if you can see this, and again, we will share this online, but this is the sliding scale. So for example, if you take a look at, if a student is in between a 2.4 and a 2.5, the combined SAT scores that colleges are looking for are around 1070 for SATs or a 21 for an ACT. And again, you can work with your student on that, okay? And it also depends on the major. So hopefully you've heard our community college system has what we call the A2B, Associate's to Bachelor Degree Transfer Option, the Commonwealth Commitment. So what does that mean? It means that it's an agreement between our community colleges, all of our community colleges, and our state system. So if the students start off at a community college and then transfer to a four-year college, they're going to be receiving a smooth process and an easy transition. So you sort of get, I call it the 2+2. 2 years in an associate's in community college program, and then you end up with a four-year degree. And most of the time, it's a very fluid process, and you can complete it as long as you're in the right coursework. It starts, we have 15 community colleges. I have students that have gone to Bunker Hill, they get right on Alewife, and they go to the city, or Middlesex is a popular one as well. If you earn a GPA of a 2.5, it is easy transfer process to a state system, but if you have a 3.0 or above, you're eligible for a tuition break, which is really helpful. So it goes back to if you start off at a community college, do well, you can have the same tuition on the third year that you did on the first year of that associate's program. And it's separate requirements for Mass Art and Mass Maritime, but we have such a wide range of programs, so it's definitely something we could talk about individually. Any questions? I know that was a lot of information. Okay, Ms. Minty, you're next. Oh, yes, go ahead. Sorry. Okay. We're actually going to be talking about SATs and ACTs, and look, Ms. Minty's going to be covering that. Any other questions? No? Good? Okay.
Okay, so yes, I am going to just talk about a few pieces of the application or factors that weigh into when colleges are making their decisions whether to accept or not accept students, and that does include if they require tests, which most still don't, but we do expect that next year there might be a few more that might begin requiring them again. These are the factors, and transcript is at the top because that is always the most important factor. All right, so speaking of the transcript, this is just to give you a snapshot of what our transcript looks like, and we're breaking it down into a few screens just because otherwise it would be too small. So the top of it, the main thing they would look at is just that the GPA on the right there is listed, weighted GPA. And I think someone else mentioned that when they apply, that GPA is going to be the average of grade 9, 10, and 11 for their weighted GPA. So right now the GPA you would see is based on the combination of grade 9 and 10. When they apply next year, it'll also include the final grades from this year. This is the part of the transcript, though, that the colleges will focus even more on. So, you know, when you look at those graphs on score, you only see the GPA, but colleges do see this whole picture, and they're equally interested in this. So they are looking at the actual courses the students took each year, including the levels you can see there, and the final grades. Now, this is an abnormal transcript, to be honest, right? Yeah. Please don't feel bad if your child's grades are not straight A's. That is not common. But I want to mention possibly that I didn't, on the first, the top of the transcript, we're giving a fake example here, but I happen to be the student. So for me, this is normal, of course. It's possible, I want to point out, this particular student does have maybe a realistic combination of honors and CP courses, so that might have allowed them to maintain these excellent grades as opposed to maybe overdoing it and then having their grades drop. Oh, and I just want to point out, as you can see, senior year, so when they apply next year, it will list their courses, but there won't be any grades yet. We do send an update to the colleges they apply to after the first quarter and after the first semester, but at the time they apply, generally the grades they're seeing are just from grade 9 to 11.
Can you let them know if advisory and homeroom actually aren't?
Oh, sure. Yes, so in our example here, homeroom and advisory are listed for grade 12. That's just a glitch. We don't actually list that on there. They don't get grades for those. Okay, and then the bottom of the transcript is really just for the college to interpret what do the abbreviations mean. What, you know, CP is college prep, what our levels are, pretty much. Okay, but along with the transcript, we also do send a detailed profile to help, especially those schools that may not be super familiar with Burlington High School. Give them context for, you know, how many students go to the school, which courses do we offer at which levels, what is the average, the lowest and the highest and the average GPA for the class. We explain our weighting system, and we do report the average test scores from that school. That's pretty much what they're looking for there. Okay, so speaking of testing, again, truly for the last few years and even this year, now we're the third year past COVID, there were only about 10 schools out of thousands in this whole country that required tests this year. The rest were either test optional or test blind. Most colleges haven't announced what they're doing yet for next year, so we do expect there will probably be at least a few more schools that will begin to require tests again, which is why we still recommend at least taking one. But I do think it's still going to be a majority of schools that are test optional. And like someone else said on a previous slide too, considering when the schools are test optional, it really only makes sense to send your score if the scores are actually above average for that school. If a school says they are test optional, they truly will not assume anything bad if you don't send scores. They'll assume your scores are just average, or you just, you know, didn't take them. No big deal. If it's test optional though, and your scores are above average, it's still not going to be a major factor in admissions, but it may help out a little bit. So in that case, you may want to send them. You should absolutely look at each college website for all the details on, first of all, whether they're test optional, and more specifically what that means for that particular school. And I don't think we have a separate slide really breaking down SAT and ACT, so just with the logos on there, I do want to mention, you know, people are more familiar with the SAT because we offer it here, and we have all our students take the practice version, the PSAT. But colleges are, if they require tests, they will take either SAT or ACT, and one is not considered superior to the other. So though we don't offer ACT here, there are a lot of local communities that do, and when we're meeting in our groups with students, we are explaining the differences, and we recommend that they do look into whichever test is a better fit for them. That is the one they should take, but either one they can take. And then in addition to looking at the individual college websites, there's a website, this has been out here for, you know, maybe 15 or more years, called fairtest.org. So there's been a movement even before COVID where more and more schools have decided to become test optional, just because they do not feel that test scores are the best reflection of someone's likelihood to succeed in college. So you can check out that extremely long list on that website, fairtest.org. Though, again, contradictory message maybe, but we do really think everyone should at least take a test, just in case any college you're interested in does require it. And you do register directly on the websites for those test companies. That the websites are there both for SAT and ACT. And the registration deadlines are about a month in advance of the test date, so keep that in mind, as well as sometimes the location where you take it can fill up in advance. So even if you're planning to take it in June, I always tell my students, just sign up as soon as you know when you're going to take it, and you'll have more choices for location. Occasionally, another good important detail to check out on the test websites is that if the student's first language is not English, some colleges do require them to also submit a test just to show their English ability. And sometimes it's even if, you know, they've maybe moved from another country and they've been here for 5 years, but the school may still require. Either there's a test called the TOEFL, but usually cheaper and easier to do is also Duolingo, is now accepted by most colleges. We recommend taking the SAT or ACT by the end of this year, but some students do like to take it a second time, and if so, you can do that either during the summer or during next fall is popular. As long as you wrap up your testing by January next year, you'd be on track for the applications. There used to be extra tests, especially if you have older students. You might be thinking questions about they may have taken the essay or subject tests. Those are eliminated. They don't exist anymore. So it's just a basic SAT now, not those extras. You do have to generally pay to take the tests, unfortunately. They're both about $60. But if your family income guidelines qualify you for either free or reduced lunch through the school, you're also eligible for a fee waiver so that you don't have to pay to take the tests. And it also covers free applications for college next year. So definitely let the counselor know if that's the case for your family. This is really just a heads up for the future. It's not for these current juniors, but for the class after that, the SAT is moving to an online test as opposed to a paper test. So for juniors, this spring and next fall and winter are still going to be paper, but starting next spring, it's going to be an online test. And ACT may be heading in that direction too. Before I get into the next slide is about recommendation letters. I guess, did anyone have pressing questions about the SATs or the ACTs? Or test optional? Yes?
How many times students should take a test?
Oh, good question. So the question is, how many times should you take it? I think, so once is enough if you're happy with your score, and I think especially now where most places are test optional, that may be enough. But traditionally, it's not uncommon to take it twice, and sometimes in the second time, what can help is if you get your scores back the first time and you get to see what type of question did you do well on or what did you struggle with, and you have time to study that piece a little bit more before you take it a second time. That can help your score. Also, just feeling more comfortable so you're less stressed the next time you take it can make the second experience could be better. But actually, I appreciate that both the SAT and ACT say that even though, they would benefit by saying you should take it 5 times because you pay every time, but they're honest about the fact that really statistically, if you take it more than twice, they don't see scores going up statistically. So I generally wouldn't recommend taking them more than twice. Yeah. When you get it back, that's a good question too. So it's often 4 to 6 weeks from when you take it. So if you take it this spring, there's plenty of time, of course, to see the score. But yeah, probably, if you're thinking my goal is I want to take it twice, it would not make sense to schedule 2 months in a row because you wouldn't have enough time to receive the score back and absorb it and practice before you were about to take it again. Yes. Yes. Yes, so we have given out, I think most of us, at least in our junior groups recently, a list of the upcoming dates. So ask if your son or daughter hasn't mentioned that, feel free to email the counselor and we can share. Oh, I'm sorry, your son is my student. I recognize your wife there, yes. I will send it to you, but basically there's, at this point, there is a March test, though it's past the official deadline for that test. You'd have to pay extra to sign up for March. The most common times to take the SAT would be in May or June. They're always on Saturdays. And then the ACT this spring, there's one in April and June. So SAT, May or June, ACT, April or June. Okay, ready to move on to recommendations? All right, so not every college requires a recommendation letter, but most do. And I would say at a minimum, most at least require 1 letter, usually from the counselor. So we all have ways that we instruct our students to provide us with what we need in advance so that we can have those letters done for them very well. Many colleges do also require at least 1 teacher and sometimes 2 teachers. So we recommend to all our students to ask at least 2 teachers at the end of this year. Ideally, they would be teachers from either their junior year or their senior year, because from a college standpoint, they gonna trust a letter from recent times more than a letter from someone who knew them 2 years ago. And it is important that they come from the 5 core subject areas, so either English, math, science, social studies, or world language. We tell them, even though I know everyone's super comfortable online these days, it is etiquette to please ask those teachers in person. And to provide at least 1 month's notice before a deadline. So even if people ask this year, it's important next year to check back in with the people who are writing your letters at least a month before your deadline, so that we can make sure we have them all ready on time. And each person's gonna have different requirements. So some teachers might just not require anything in particular, and others might have a specific form to fill out. All the counselors have our own forms as well. And it's not usually required, but you could consider if there's somebody you have a close relationship with in a different capacity, like a coach or a supervisor or religious leader outside of school. Those are optional letters, but many colleges will accept at least one additional optional letter. So not common, but not uncommon either. You see, I guess I've been mentioning the do column first. On the don't side, don't bother getting more excessive letters than what you need, because many colleges do actually limit through score. We can't even send more than 2 if all that college wants is 2. So it doesn't make sense to ask all these people to spend their free time writing letters and then not be able to use them. Generally, letters are also confidential, so keep that in mind. But as far as choosing who to ask, we do tell our students, sometimes they think, oh, I should just ask this teachers where I got the highest grades in their class. But those aren't always the best letters. What the colleges do most want to hear about, they see the grades on the transcript, so they don't need to hear about the grade. They want to hear about what is the person like in the class. So maybe a good person to ask would be a class where you participate or you help other students, or you maybe talk with that teacher outside of the classroom. There's no one formula, but we would want them to say something more personal. And actually, sometimes if there's a class where you had a lower grade in it, but that teacher might be able to talk about the persistence you had and the improvement that you made over time, that letter could serve you better than just kind of a generic letter from one of the classes that you did better in. And then it is wonderful to also send thank you notes. And I have seen actually more students doing that lately than used to, which is great. All right, so on the essay, that's another thing we'll get into in our groups at the end of the year. But most applications do require an essay, and we'll help them. Another counselor is going to talk about the common application, which is where that essay is usually located. They have a variety of topics they can choose from. One of the topics is just topic of your choice, so they truly can write about anything, but there are more specific prompts if the open-ended is feeling too overwhelming. We would highly recommend at least beginning to draft it over the summer so that they don't come back in the fall having not started it yet. And usually we offer a one-day, we call it a summer boot camp in the summer. Up here it says summer workshop on all different aspects of the application, but often there's an English teacher who takes part in that workshop too, where they will review essays for students or help them generate ideas. So that's a great opportunity as well. They are, okay. So there are hopefully also going to be a couple events during this semester for juniors. One, we arrange for admissions officers to come from a variety of colleges and do a presentation for students, and they just talk about their own tips on the essay. And then junior English teachers this year, it used to happen in senior English classes, but they're shifting to, I believe, hopefully assigning a college essay as an assignment in English class this year, so that it will kind of build in that getting people started and getting some feedback. All right, and then the last piece I'm going to talk about is the activity list. So activity list is sort of synonymous with resume, but it's a little different than the type of resume you would use to apply for a job. So you don't state an objective at the top. It's just a format that's a pretty clear format that will just show someone what are the activities you've been involved in between 9th and 12th grade outside of your academic classes. And during our groups, we help students work on this, usually in early April, because just after April vacation, there's a committee that begins to meet actually to consider this junior class for awards at the end of the year. So that's the major reason to do it in April this year. But the other reason to have an activity list, several of them, is that next year during the scholarship application process, they'll use their activity list to apply for scholarships. Also, many college applications give them a spot where they can upload an activity list as well. All right, and any questions about, I realized I didn't pause for questions on some of the other slides I just did, but I'm about to pass it over to another counselor. So any questions on anything else I just shared? All right, then I'm going to pass it over to Molly Leary next.
Thank you, and I'm going to switch sides. I like this other side better. As Ms. Mitzi mentioned, the Common Application, you will hear a lot about this. It is yet another website the students do have to navigate. It's the most common application used for college admissions. It is one application sent to multiple colleges, so there are hundreds of colleges within the Common App. It's made up of the application supplements and then paying the payment for the application fees for each college. We will assist the students in small group meetings with creating their Common App account and sort of helping them get started on navigating it. They cannot complete the entire thing this year. There are certain aspects of the application that they cannot do until the fall, but at the very least, we show them what they can do now and we help them get started on that. So they will create their accounts in the group meetings. The website is right there. It is something that we help them get started on, but they do need to carve out time, their own time, to work on it between junior year and into the fall, right up until they click submit. That will be part of their responsibility next year. And then private applications, so schools that are not within the Common Application. Endicott, for some reason, always jumps out in my mind up in Beverly. They have their own private application. So this information can be found on the college websites, whether or not they are a Common App school or if they have their own private application. So what that means is a student would have to apply electronically through the college's website using their own application. So your child might get away with only having to do the Common Application, or they may have to do multiple applications depending upon where they apply next year. All of the UMasses accept the Common Application. Not all of the state schools do, but all of the UMasses do. So if students apply to at least one UMass, then they'll be using the Common App.
What percentage of schools? 50% are Common App, 1%, 2%?
Oh, I would say it's high. It's more than 50. Anyone have a guess?
900.
Well, it's 900, yes. So
900 out of 3,000 schools or
Yeah.
6,000?
Most of the schools
So-
our students apply to, though, I'd say like 80% of ours, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
most of our students are applying to Common App.
Okay, so I stand corrected. It was not 50%. It feels like way more.
Yeah.
Our students is probably.
Okay, all right. There are several different admissions options, which will determine when the students apply next fall. Regular decision is the traditional application deadline, typically anywhere from January 1st through March 1st. That allows the student to have almost the whole first semester to boost up their grades if they need to, work on their applications. Early action is a non-binding option. Typically, most of those deadlines are November, but believe it or not, some of the schools down south, typically the Carolinas, are as early as October 15th. So students really do need to get a lot done this year and be strong students through the end of junior year to select that option. And it's non-binding. Decisions are received in early winter, so it's a nice way to find out early, and you still don't have to commit to your college until May 1st. Early decision, not to be confused with action, this is the binding option. It's for students who have one first choice school that they know they can afford. So they're really committed to getting into that school, and if they do get in, they have to sign a contract, parent has to sign it, counselor has to sign it as well. And if they are accepted, then they have to retract. They have to contact all the other colleges they applied to and retract those applications. Rolling admission, just glitched. Rolling admissions, schools review applications as received, so there's not a set deadline necessarily. With that, it's earlier the better to get that submitted, and you usually get a quick decision. So we do set some goals for the juniors, some things that they should aim to do by the end of this year. For example, create a list of potential colleges in their SCORE account. It says complete an activity list, but when we ask them to create it and we have it due in Google Classroom this April, it's really a draft of what they've done up until this point and maybe things that they know they're doing next year, but they will continue to update that activity list through senior year. It will also be a goal to ask junior teachers for letters of recommendation, so we'll cover that in small groups. Possibly to begin their questionnaire for a counselor letter of recommendation, which is required by many colleges. And then, of course, as I mentioned, to create their Common App account and begin filling that out. How you can help. Just a few recommendations. Do let your team drive the bus. So to be completely blunt, colleges don't want to hear from parents. They want to hear from the applicants themselves. So we urge students to make sure that they are the ones to reach out to college admissions reps, to be making those contacts, and to communicate directly with us, and be completing their tasks, and really to own this process. It is their future. They should be filling out their own applications, things like that. Do discuss restrictions up front. So I think Ms. Diozzi said earlier, you know, if California is off limits and your child is really set on going to California, make sure you do have those sometimes difficult conversations so that they're aware of what your expectations are as they do this, or as they are researching and finalizing their list of schools. Do not limit choices based on sticker fees, so you truly don't know how much aid you could get from a school. So I know some of those sticker prices can be shocking when you first see them, but you never know how much aid you're going to get, and it really could bring it down to public state school cost for some of those private schools that might look really expensive at first. Do remind your teen of deadlines, so that can be really helpful, and do encourage college visits. If they'll allow you to go along, maybe you bring them. Do try to limit conversations to once per week. We've given that advice for several years now. We've heard from families that can be helpful, so that students know they're not going to be asked every single day about what they're doing and what they have completed. So maybe set aside one time per week where you can both check in and get a sense of where they're at with everything. And please, we just ask that you don't create accounts on behalf of your child. It can be really tricky when we meet with our students one-on-one, and we might need to assist them with something and they need to log in and they don't have the login. So that can be tricky, so please encourage them to create their own accounts. So these next few slides do not pertain to all students, so I won't spend too much time on on each of them. But for students in need of support services, including students on IEPs, students 504 plans, colleges grant academic accommodations on a case-by-case basis. So what they are often looking for, if students do want accommodations at the college level, is they want evaluation results within the past 3 years. So that is more important than any sort of plan that they have had in high school. What they want is those evaluation results. And we do urge students to meet with the support services office at their college, wherever they end up. Check each individual college for specific requirements and deadlines. Students applying to Mass State universities who submit documentation of a disability may be eligible for exemption from standardized tests, so something to keep in mind if that applies to your child. NCAA, for those students who are looking to play Division I or II sports, so not Division III, they do have to go to this website and create a profile, and we encourage them to do that as early as now. The NCAA has their own requirements. They have outlined on it's all outlined on this website. So if this does apply to your child, please visit this website sooner rather than later to check out the requirements. There are specific classes they have to take and things like that. And this is also helpful highlighting this because if it does apply to your child, any one of these slides, encourage them to talk one-on-one with their counselor about these, about any of these options. The gap year option too. It's time intentionally taken after high school and before college to explore something that a student is really interested in. Oftentimes it is through hands-on learning, and it might include working, volunteering, sometimes in the US, sometimes abroad, language immersion, work exchange programs. There are a number of options. Outward bound. Programs vary widely in time frame and cost. Occasionally there are gap year webinars or even a gap year, I guess a fair, they would call it too. Occasionally those do happen locally, and we try to push out that information to students and parents if they are interested in the gap year. And most importantly, if a student is interested in a gap year, we recommend that they still go through the college process if they're definitely planning to go to college after a year. Because while they have our support and while they have teachers to write them letters of recommendation, they can go through the whole process, they can be accepted to a college, and they can ask to be deferred for a year. So they can put off their acceptance for a year, which means they don't have to go through the whole process on their own that following year. It's already done. They've already been accepted. They're just deferring admission. Oh, that's it for me, Mr. Adebayo. Any questions? Yes? Say that again? For one semester? That is a good question. I am not 100% sure. I would imagine that it varies from college to college. I think you will get different answers. Does anyone else?
Northeastern has been admitting some kids in January, so you never know. But that's it.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So it will vary. That answer will vary depending on the college. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go over some, financial aid information. We try to make it sound a little bit more friendly, college affordability. But we do have some events later in the school year that we'll talk about a little later that gets into financial aid, but you can go to the next slide. I'm just going to go over some, just some information in regard to financial aid. And when we talk about financial aid, we're talking about where funding sources can come from that would assist parents to pay tuition at colleges and universities. Sources from the federal government, state government, and we'll talk about a form that you'll need to fill out to see if you qualify for funding from the federal or the state government. There's another form specific for private colleges and universities that we'll discuss. And then there's other opportunities that we'll talk about through applications through private companies and local scholarship organizations. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So, the FAFSA form. How many have heard of the FAFSA? I'm sure most of you have. Okay, so for years and years, it would always become available January 1 of the student's senior year. January 1st of the student's senior year, the FAFSA form would be available. And I think now, for at least the past 5 years, it now is available in October. So that's changed. So next year, fast forward to October 15th is when the FAFSA form will become available to you. It's an online form. This is to see if you qualify for state or federal funds. Okay, and from what I hear from parents over the years, they've streamlined it a lot. If you've already filled one out, it pre-populates with a lot of your information now because it links through the federal government. The The CSS profile, that is a form that is for private institutions. And the funding source for that would be from those private institutions. Again, from talking to parents over the years, the CSS profile, and having seen it, it asks a lot more questions. It's a little bit longer form to fill out, more detailed. So that, again, is funding through colleges and universities, not through the federal or state government. One of the things you'll hear, I don't know if it's on the next slide. If you can go back one. So you're going to hear something called an EFC, Estimated Family Contribution. That's what the FAFSA form is going to give you. That EFC is basically the estimate of what the government says they think you can afford for college. And it's never what you hope. But what they do is the calculation says, you know, if your child's going to college, they think you're going to afford $30,000 a year. The college tuition is $40,000 a year. And then they would help to give you that $10,000 gap. They would try to fill that with financial aid. Did you have a question? Private college in this area, BU, Northeastern, Merrimack, state universities would be separate, the Mass Public College and Universities. So any kind of state-funded school would be a public college or university, but there's private universities all around us as well. And so, financial aid event. So MIFA, it's a very, very informative, helpful website. It's in multiple languages. They have webinars, videos, anything you want information on, free. Check out the website. It is very, very useful. I would highly recommend that parents and students check that website out. So scholarships and grants. So you're going to, when we talk about financial aid, it's scholarships and grants. It's scholarships and grants are money that you don't have to pay back. You can qualify for different types of loans, and some of the loans that you would be eligible for, you have to fill out the FAFSA. Okay, so we talked a little bit about subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans. The FAFSA form and the profile can help you potentially receive some of those types of financial assistance. And then work study. Work study would be an option for a student going off to college that they are set up for employment on the campus. And they have an estimate of what the student would receive for an income, and they essentially take that off the price, if that makes sense. So, although just be warned, that check doesn't go to you as the parent or to the tuition, it goes to the student. All right, so, but they still factor that in. Any questions so far? Local scholarships. So last year, there was about $365,000 distributed to Burlington High School seniors, graduates of Burlington High School. There was about 180 students in this auditorium. There's an awards night, and we go through a whole scholarship process for those students. So it's really, the community has been unbelievable with contributing to the scholarship program over the years. It's not one organization and one committee making all these decisions. It's essentially several that will be reviewing applications and working together. All the scholarships are kind of distributed locally on one particular night, but what we do is we try to list what the more popular applications are for scholarships. But keep in mind, people that are donating are businesses in town, youth sport programs. We have civic organizations, fraternal organizations. There are some families that have had family members pass away, and they do memorial scholarships. So there's just a long list of scholarships that are available. And to look at that list, we have, again, several different websites, but Scholarship America, that is one that we really start to talk about with students next year. But that's a site, we compare it a lot to the Common Application. Student fills out their application on Scholarship America, and come February of senior year, you'll see what local scholarships are available based on your profile. And through that application alone, there's probably about 70 or 80 scholarships. And again, these are local scholarships. These aren't scholarships for students from Woburn or Wilmington, it's for Burlington students. We have another application called the General Scholarship Application. It's now a Google Doc, which makes it very convenient. Again, that applies students to a number of scholarships. Adopt a Class, how many parents have heard of Adopt a Class? So, Adopt a Class is when you can literally cash in your senior year. Those hours that you've contributed, I think parents do it K through 8, and then once students get to high school, we're gonna, before people leave too, we're gonna hand out an evaluation form before you go. I figure we'll just hand them out now. So, Adopt a Class is when you can actually cash in, so all those hours, you have to fill out an application, but all those hours get calculated, and you actually get a financial award for those hours that you've contributed over the years. And then SCORE, SCORE does have scholarship applications. We post and house all the applications on that site. We just ask you to use caution. If someone says they're going to find scholarships for you, you just need to give us X amount of money. You really have to, think about that and look into that agency. A lot of this stuff can be found for free. So please keep that in mind. MCAS, so students are eligible based on for tuition waivers to the Mass Public Colleges and Universities based on MCAS scores. Keep in mind it's a tuition waiver. So essentially, depending on the college, it has to be a Mass Public College and University, so any of the state universities or from the UMass system. Tuition waiver would mean tuition is, and I know there's a website that lists it, but we'll say about $1,800 to $2,000 per year at UMass Amherst. The tuition, again, it's around, we'll say $2,000, but room, board, and fees is $28,000. So the waiver is on just the tuition. So keep that in mind. It's not the bigger amount. It would be nice if it was, but it's not. So if you qualify for this award, we would be sending you out information in the mail, probably within the next couple of weeks. It's based on MCAS scores from last spring, and for new students that may have taken it in this past November, they would be eligible as well. You just have to fill out additional application for this particular award. The Adams Scholarship is the top 25% of MCAS scores. So the state essentially gives us this information, who scored the top 25% in this school on the MCAS, and you would get an Adams award. If you're not in the top 25%, but you still scored high enough, you can do an addition, you could shoot for this one. This is called the COPLIC. That just means you have to take some additional steps. So the Adams is nice because you just get a letter and that's it. The COPLIC, if you don't get an Adams award, you can apply for a COPLIC if your scores are close. Those are the exact scores you would need. You would need to complete an application and take some additional steps in order to receive the COPLIC award. And I know I'm going through these kind of quickly. I'm not gonna read all that verbatim. But if you have any questions on the COPLIC, you can certainly give me a call. The COPLIC coordinator here, and I think all the counselors are very knowledgeable about the COPLIC award. But essentially, if you hit for the COPLIC, if you hit the scores, you need to do 2 additional tasks, basically, in order to receive the COPLIC award. And it kind of lists out what those tasks could be. Okay. So, students are really about to embark now on something that is can be challenging, and there is peer pressure, parent pressure, self-pressure. So, we're not saying pressure isn't a good thing. Sometimes that pressure can help us focus a little bit more, achieve a little higher. But we just want to make sure, as parents, we want you to be aware, and we want students to be aware that this process really, this process really can be stressful. And so we have been in our office, the past couple of years, really been trying to help students with just general coping strategies to kind of manage that stress. And I think that's kind of what this slide is about in terms of, you know, kind of getting ready to embark on this journey over the next 6 to 8 months. One of the previous slides that Mrs. Leary had mentioned was that conversation with your children about this process. I think trying to find scheduled times to do that can be helpful. Because keep in mind, juniors right now and then senior year, everyone is asking them, what are you doing next year? Where are you going to college? Have you decided? And it's not just you, it's their peers, teachers, you know, we're calling them down. So they're getting it from all angles. So just as we go through this process, just please keep that in mind. That they're going to be fine. They're going to be accepted to colleges. There's 5,000 colleges in this country. So we ask you to really think about that as you kind of navigate through this process. Upcoming events. Okay, so the financial aid event is not there. June 8th, Thursday, June 8th, and we'll be sending reminders. We have a Financial Aid 101 night. It's hosted by MIFA, the website I referenced. That agency sponsors the event. They don't charge, they come in for free. The financial aid director from Simmons will be here. Her name's Amy Staffier. She's been coming here for several years now. And she just talks about the whole process. She gets much more in depth than I did. And she gets into the nuts and bolts, very knowledgeable. So I would suggest you attend that on June 8th.
So just clarify that they're in person now, not virtual.
Thank you. In person. Yep, that would be an in-person event. Course selection process, you heard one of the counselors talk about the upcoming course selection process. And we're rolling out all the program of studies and connecting with students. Well, parents, you have the opportunity to come in on March 2nd for information. It's just the course selection process. And we'd essentially give you the same presentation that we plan to give students. And then, oh yeah, the same day, June 8th, in the morning, we have a parent breakfast. So, again, all our night events are recorded. June 8th is really just a time for parents to hear about some of the topics we're talking about tonight. It's kind of a refresher on that. And you heard Ms. Minty talk a little bit about it, but in the summer we do have a college application workshop that we would publicize. All right, we should update this slide as well. So, two things. I think Mrs. Wojtaszek handed out an evaluation. We would ask you to fill that out and drop it off before you leave. Also, SCORE. You've heard a lot about SCORE. If you as parents would like access to SCORE. We also have sign-up sheets for that. Ms. Diozzi, do you have those? The SCORE?
No.
Oh. We do have, did we get the SCORE sign-up sheets? No, okay.
Just, yeah.
So, what you could do is you could email Mrs. Kavanaugh in our office or the counselor. The first slide on that packet you have, the counselor's information is there. You could always just email me too, but we do have a form in our office for parents if they wanted to, wanted an account for SCORE. So, just you could email me or the counselor, anyone in our office really, so we can get you access to SCORE. College Fair, it's coming up. We have a flyer for that. This is something Burlington co-sponsors with some other Middlesex League schools. It's been going on for a long time. It stopped during COVID, but now it's back. Historically, it had been in October, but I think you heard we're finding that this process has really shifted in terms of timeline, so now it's going to be in March. So it's an opportunity for a college fair. I think right now there's 95 colleges that plan to attend. It's a really good option just to check things out. I'm sure Ms. Diozzi had mentioned it, but you want to go there with a list in mind because it can be if you just walk in cold, it can be very overwhelming. You go in with a list, 5 or 6 schools, and you hit those schools, and then you can kind of explore beyond that. I would highly suggest trying to attend that college fair if you're able to. Again, there's a flyer in the back. It's March 16th. It's at Reading High School. And I know Reading can be our arch rival in sports, but we work together with them for this process, along with some other Middlesex League schools. All right, So that kind of concludes the formal presentation, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you want to ask. Go for it. I'm going to stick around a little bit after, too, if you wanted to ask something that you didn't want to ask to the whole crowd. But does anyone have any general questions? Yes?
I was just curious about how the internships senior year impact the rigor of their like senior year, and if it counts as like experience, or how that impacts their senior year and their GPA and stuff.
It doesn't impact their GPA. The expectation is that they wrap up courses by their honors in college prep courses by April 1st. AP courses, dual enrollment courses, students actually need to stay until the AP exam time frame. So those students would need to stay longer because of that rigor, and plus the AP students are preparing for an exam. So those students would be required to stay, which is usually...
AP kids don't do the internship then?
No, they can do the intern, they can still participate, they would just come in for those specific classes. A lot of the AP students tend to do site-based interns with Mr. Wong. He's in our technology department. He offers like a flipped intern. So students are able to still have that opportunity, but they would come in just for their AP courses. I'm not sure off the top of my head what other things that some of the AP students have done.
In the school system, and they can see what the calendar's gonna be.
Yeah.
So they can tell their boss when they can go.
Yeah, I mean, really, a student could map out with whomever is supervising them when they would need to come in. And some AP teachers try to, like let's say for example, a particular AP teacher teaches 2 or 3 sections of AP. Some teachers say you can come in on any 3 of those classes, just for the purposes of the intern. So the intern is a program we started at the high school about 4 years ago. Students have to choose a site, and they actually finish up on April 1st. Most of them. Some students choose not to do it and stick around. Yes?
If I enroll our child through SATs or ACTs, do you go to the counseling office?
No, I don't know what slide number it was, but you go to the website. So SAT, ACT registration is not with the school counseling department. That is between you, it's between the student and either the college board or the ACT. So our role with that process, obviously help interpret results and discuss that, but we don't actually do the registration here. PSAT is a different story.
Is it online?
Yes, yep. Oh, you mean for taking the test? No, not yet. Fall of 24. So this class, you'll be the last, this junior class will be the last class to take the hard copy SAT.
And spots do get filled up, so it's good to register earlier.
Any other questions? Yes?
So after the space scholarship, are they invited to apply, or they can just like based on the criteria decide to apply by themselves?
For the MCAS scholarships?
No, and scholarship, are they invited?
They will be invited for the Coplik. The Adams, there's no invite. You just get a letter that says, you just essentially get a letter that says you've qualified. And that's not until fall of senior year.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. Oh, was it mentioned? Oh, all right. One last thing too. We're actually excited about this in our office. This is new for us. For years and years, we've had college reps come in October, September, really October, November of senior year. They would come in, talk to groups of seniors. We are going to pilot this year doing that for juniors. So we've already have 5 or 6 colleges that are, what happens is they come here to the school, 45 minutes, students come down and they can hear from the colleges. So it's a good opportunity to hear directly from the admissions reps. Oftentimes it's the rep that covers the school. I think right now we only have 3 or 4, but we do have, we're actively trying to let colleges know. We've contacted 30 or 40 colleges that typically come in the fall to let them know we're doing spring visits now. And juniors that are here, there's not too many juniors here right now, but they sign up through SCORE.
How are the students notified of that schedule?
Through SCORE. So,
Of which rep is coming?
yes.
Okay.
SCORE actually lists out the college, the name of the rep, all that information. So So it's not, our first visit is it's not until late March. So we're just starting to publicize it now.
So if parents sign up for the score, is it tied into the student's travel?
Yes. Yep.
Parent wouldn't be able to say register a student for that visit. You can
No.
allow, but you wouldn't be able to.
But as a parent,
Activity.
one thing you can do is you could recommend colleges for your son or daughter. So you could actually go in and, as a parent, hey, check out this college. Virtually, you can tell them to do that. Good questions. Yes? I'm going to try to, they haven't shared it with me yet, but once they do, I plan on sending out an email. We'll try to get a link on the website too, but as soon as we have the information, we would share it. All right, again, I'm going to stick around if anyone wanted to ask any other questions. Thank you very much. Have a good night.